On the podcast today, we're going to talk about Eastern philosophy versus self-help, self-improvement, self-motivation. I should say also Eastern spirituality. And so one of the common messages I've received on the channel and through my website for a long time, and especially since you and I have been doing this podcast, is a lot of people are thanking us for bringing Eastern philosophy and spirituality to their forefront and, bringing and making them more aware of the deeper elements of Eastern spirituality, because they've been following or been trying to get themselves out of depression and stress and anxiety through self-help, self-improvement, self-motivation, which in and of themselves can be an empty endeavor, because the focus is completely different, right? So when you're looking at self-help, it's based on achievement and building a life for yourself and gaining respect and attention from others and so forth and so on. It's about boosting yourself up, trying to get yourself out of the doldrums, so to speak. I remember once Joe Rogan said on the podcast, talking about depression, you've just got to do something. That's true and false. It's a dangerous message because, yes, in some sense, for someone who is depressed and suffer from, a lot of anxiety and stress, maybe they do have to do something with their life and, motivate themselves to try and be better in that regard, like in the social sphere and, find something that they really enjoy. But that has an end also. Like it's not related to like a complete transformation of yourself and a deeper understanding of yourself.
And I think also that message could be very ignorant message because that's say that not to regard that where that individual's mindset is at. Like that particular individual must have gone through such a traumatic experience personally, and things just don't pan out right for that person, and to that individual you just say you got to do something. Like that's very blank message. It's not very constructive. Yeah, almost like completely ignorant to where that person is at. It's not very considerable response, I don't think.
No. And overgeneralizing like that, especially if we're looking at self-help, is very dangerous because, like you said, each and everyone's situation is different, right? Like they may suffer from extreme depression and have suicidal tendencies and so forth and so on. So just doing something is not going to get them out of that dark place. Where we could say Eastern philosophy and spirituality you could use that in a general sphere because that is about understanding yourself at a deeper level, going beneath the persona, understanding why you are this way and actually why you do have suicidal tendencies or you suffer from depression and so forth and so on. And as we know, that's all linked to the persona. It's linked to, especially the way socialization is set up these days, is, we ought to be high achievers, we ought to have goals. And then when you realize that 99.999% of us are just ordinary, then you realize that you're not fulfilling these goals of this 0.0001% of so-called extraordinary achievers. And so then you suffer from stress and anxiety and so forth and so on. And it's a complete wrong perspective of life.
It almost became like a social obligation nowadays because of the social media platforms. Like people feel that they're obliged to keep their appearances for their family and friends and whatnot. And if they don't, they maybe feel a little bit insecure that they might lose these connections with people. And yeah, I can understand because the social media has been taking over our life so much, so that people feel that they ought to really be participating in these things, but that's not really true. Like you said, it actually contributes more of that empty feeling that you have to keep up with these people, whereas without understanding what kind of individual you really are, what sort of person you really are. You know?
Exactly. Well, what Eastern spirituality teaches you, Eastern philosophy teaches you, is that most of us are ordinary and are going to live an ordinary life. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. Self-help, on the other hand, teaches you that you ought to have an extraordinary life. And as Alain de Botton once said, it gives this idea that, and it's a dangerous idea, and it's an American idea, that anyone can achieve anything. And it's a dangerous idea. And it's not to say that you ought not to be self-motivated. And, you know, obviously you do need some get up and go in your life, and if you want to get something done and so forth and so on. But there's a limit to that. Do you know what I mean? And that idea that anyone can achieve anything is actually not a reality. It's not a reality. We all have different backgrounds and upbringings and so forth and so on. And if you don't believe that, then maybe read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, to get a deeper psychological understanding of that. But that's okay. But see, this American idea that anyone can achieve anything, yeah, that's the message is good. The message is right, but it's not realistic. You see, this is how it's a dangerous idea. And why it is a dangerous idea is because if you're not doing anything with your life, and that's the template of life out there, you start to feel like a loser. You see? You start to feel like, oh, man, I'm not achieving, like, look at all of these other people. This is how it's a dangerous idea. Do you see?
That sort of idea plants seed in your mind that you need to be somebody.
You need to be somebody.
You need to achieve something to show people, so that you can show something that you've achieved for other people.
In the movie Patton, old movie from the 70s, war movie, General Patton says in the movie, Americans love a winner and will not tolerate a loser. And that's become the mentality, not just of Americans in general, but it's becoming the mentality of the world. And this is a very dangerous place to exist in, because you're basically saying that 99.9999% of the population are losers. That's what you're saying, because they're living we are all living an ordinary life. You and I are in that 99%. And most people listening and watching this podcast are in that percentage as well. And so, sorry, love. And so what you've done is we have a life where most people are ordinary, but you're trying to create a life for extraordinary people. And that's the height of craziness, because like you have a life which is supposed to cater for the ordinariness of life. And when we think about it, life is actually pretty good from that perspective. These days, all of our ancestors in all cultures have been working towards this point in time where we are now, where we all have a roof over our head, we have good, healthy, nutritious food, and then we've essentially thrown a snake in the grass and said, paradise is not what it's meant to be. You ought to strive to be extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, like, so we have it, but we don't. But we're starting to slowly create a society that doesn't accept ordinariness.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, like for example, over in America, they created a society just to cater the winners, right? But that is to imply that either they are not acknowledging the 99.9% of population are, let's say, losers, or they just don't know. Yeah. Either way, they just don't pay any attention to the rest of the people who who can't achieve and who don't achieve.
Which is a majority.
Yeah, which is a majority. So that's to create some interesting landscape of society, you see. Like they highly likely implant some like a fantastic idea to ordinary people to not to look at their situations correctly, right, objectively, and they give false hopes to, which I don't like. And it's a sociological level, that's to create a lot of below middle class people, not paying too much attention to those people's livelihood, for example.
Yes.
Like when we visited America, we really shocked by the poverty that we never get to see in the media, like in New York and Los Angeles and pretty much everywhere that we visited, right?
Unfortunately.
And like we were really shocked how poor some people are,
Especially
really.
for a first world nation.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
in air quotes.
And apparently it's just growing, that number.
Yeah.
So that like a winners-driven society is not catering those people. So where is that going? And they don't want to acknowledge, okay, well and good, but where do you see the America as a nation look like in the future? That's a pretty concerning thing. And again, the rest of the world really like embracing that idea of a winner's mentality. So that becomes kind of a global problem. And yeah, I don't know, like people are blindsided or they just don't look at it. Like, it's just interesting dynamic.
Well, the thing about it is, right, self-help and self-improvement, self-motivation, that keeps you in the sociological game. Do you see?
Yeah.
And society and government and those sorts of institutions they don't care about your own personal liberation. They need you to participate in the game. You see? And so self-help is about keeping you in the game. But it's about motivating you more, to get more involved, get more engaged. But the problem is as we've been discussing, not everyone can achieve everything. Anything, like everything, you know what I mean? So there are going to be those people who fall out of society and become homeless and so forth and so on because they don't know how to play the game, so to speak. And so you've built a society that's not catering to everyone because you've built a society based on extraordinariness and not ordinariness. And this is what Alain de Botton once said, that the Danish have worked it out because they've created a society for losers. Now, not using losers in a
failure
as a failure, but as just ordinary. So they've made a society for ordinary people where everything is exceptional, but it's made for just, you and I, and no one is seeking, well, not many people are seeking fame and fortune and so forth and so on because life is just generally good. And so that's very important, right? So if we look at the self-help section in the bookstores, right, they cater towards two people, or they cater towards two mentalities, or two attitudes we want, which is like basically how to make a lot of money, how to make millions of dollars, and the other one is how to deal with low self-esteem. They're both connected. They're not separate, actually, as you know. Like, seeking lots of money also caters for low self-esteem. You're trying to gain respect and attention from others by gaining material wealth. So when we look at it from a deeper psychological level, we're dealing with people who haven't been intrinsically loved a lot in their life, and they're yearning for more and more and more and more. It's like when you see the guy with a Lamborghini or something like that, though you may think he's greedy and this and that, maybe that guy just is trying to acquire a lot of love in his life, but he's just never had that.
And that person wants attention from having that sort of possession.
Exactly. So they're trying to get it through means that actually don't work. Do you see? And that's what that extraordinary society is trying to promote, is that if you acquire all these material possessions that is associated with the winner, then you will be psychologically stable and free, and you will have everything you need. But as we see with depression rates, especially with wealthy people, and suicides with wealthy people, and so forth and so on, that's not the truth. You know, if you're a parent and you're raising a child, and that child has no yearning to become famous or extremely wealthy, then as a parent you've done something right, because they don't need, and the child doesn't need anything else to validate their existence. They've accepted themselves as they are. And you know, if you have a child out there listening or watching this podcast, and that's, you've done something right.
Yeah, that child had been given so much love that child needed, and as a growing up. And that's but in a sense that's kind of normal, right?
Yep.
Like that should be the way it is. But unfortunately most of our parents also pursue those external goals and
of course,
social status and whatnot, and being a child of that kind of parents it's a bit, you know, difficult to be fulfilled by just being ordinary.
Because if we just go back, say if we just go back to the 1800s, depression rates were low, you know, suicide rates were low, and there was a lot more love in the family because of what you said. The parents weren't goal-oriented. They weren't confused by this illusion of winner and loser. The ordinary life was the good life, and it actually is the good life, which is what we're going to get into today. But they didn't have any of these confusing social norms that have become norms, actually, in the modern day. And so children did feel like they were loved, you know, or they knew that, well, not they felt like they were loved, you know. But what we're doing with society today is it's become super competitive, because you got to fall into that 0.00001% of extraordinary achievers. That's what parents want for their students, right? Like we see this a lot, especially in Eastern Asia. They've really taken on board this American idea of winner and losers, and so you ought to get to that level. And if you don't, then you're just well, in their eyes, if you become a plumber or an electrician or something like that, then you're a loser.
It's the perfect cocktail with the Confucianism.
It is, yeah.
Because Confucianism supports to be looked in a certain way and achieve certain social status and whatnot, and that to be regarded as a successful life. Yeah, so it's go hand in hand.
Definitely goes hand in hand. No, it's perfect. But this competitiveness is killing us, see? It's killing us, and this is the danger of self-help, self-improvement, self-motivation, because it's not peeling the onion back. It's not. So, for example, if you do suffer from depression and suicidal tendencies and so forth and so on, and you're just going to focus on doing something with your life, it's band-aid solutions. You're not looking or addressing the problem itself. You see, you're applying a band-aid to it. It'll make you feel good temporarily, but it's not going to give you lasting change.
Yeah, definitely. And I think socially, most of us don't have much knowledge to where to look at, for example, to make themselves better and become a better person, to improve yourself. It's a right intention, right? But because mainstream publishing house and mainstream media usually promote that sort of very new age kind of a materially motivated self-help, self-improvement books or speakers and whatnot, and then people all get drawn into that kind of materials. But it's a kind of it's very shallow knowledge. I wouldn't say that's not true, what they're promoting, but it's too like shiny and fantastic ideas. That's what they're trying to promote, so that people get drawn into it, but then doesn't really give any kind of solution. And most of those books, I find it very scientific, facts and figures and this kind of information based, and also much to do with like other people's stories. It tells you a lot of other people's stories, or just about those people and what they've achieved.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make good connection and you can learn a lot of things, but it's not about you really.
No.
It doesn't teach you about what you actually need to do, right?
No.
So I think that's a lot of things that we need to think about.
Well, it's a good point, love, because the thing is, like, people will use examples like, they might say, oh, look at Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He was homeless and now he's a highest paid movie actor in the world, and look at his work ethic and so forth and so on. But everyone's different. You're trying to say that everyone can be like Dwayne Johnson, and that's not true. There's so many factors to take in. There's psychological factors. There's your genetic makeup that you receive from your parents. We are complex patterns, and we're not exactly the same on that level. On the Atman level, of course, there is no difference, but that doesn't have anything to do with psychology or personality. But they're trying to promote, like you said, through other people's stories, as if that relates to you, and it doesn't really relate to you.
It's got nothing to do with you, actually. No. Literally, it's got nothing to do with you. It might give you like a really boosted motivation and things like that, but it all depends on how you use it, how you can make use of it.
Yeah. Well, if we look at Dwayne Johnson's point of view, right? He was homeless, so of course he was motivated. Not saying that all homeless people are motivated to get out of that situation, but for him personally, he was motivated to get out of that situation, and he did, and then some. But most people who are going to all of these self-help gurus and lectures and this and that are generally middle-class people, and are just trying to get on with their life and are trying to look at a greater way of dealing with society itself, because what we are not taught in this world when we're brought into it, not even by our parents or not by anyone in society, is how to deal with this inherent suffering that we feel as individuals in the world. Obviously, Eastern philosophy and spirituality deal with that, but when we look at it from that perspective of winners and losers, and that you ought to be a winner, that only throws fuel on the fire of that suffering that we feel going through life, because we don't have a greater understanding. And self-help, self-motivation, and that won't give you a deeper understanding of that. And so what happens when people do start to follow these self-help gurus and are trying to make a better life for themselves? They stay in this perpetual loop of trying to motivate themselves, but they're not getting anywhere. It's like a car spinning tires on the ground, but you're not traveling forward. So I don't want to mention anyone's name here, but like there's a particular self-help guru who, you guys can probably work it out for yourself, but who people will go to all the time, and they'll pay like $4,000 to go and see this individual. And this individual, though may be eloquent with their words, but they keep people in this perpetual cycle of needing more self-help and more self-motivation, trying to improve themselves, but no one's making any forward progress. And some people may say, oh yeah, but my business has gone forward because of this individual, and I've sharpened certain things up in my life. I'm not denying that, but you're not making the ground in the internal world. You're not making any ground, because you're trying to throw all of these band-aids and bandages on the wounds that you have, but you're not going forward.
It's almost like a painkiller.
Yeah,
how painkiller works, right? Yeah, we have pain internally or externally, and we take painkillers, and it temporarily the pain goes away, but the problem is still there, right? And more you take painkiller, the problem gets even worse, right? So it's fine to go and see that sort of speakers and listen to people like that, or reading books from that sort of people and whatnot. It's all well and good, but you got to remember, if we were to just concentrate on that side of self-improvement, what happens internally is that I think we just stop. We don't even look at what's happening within ourselves, right? So like you mentioned, suffering and pain and whatnot. Those suffering and pain is there, and it may get worse actually from just focusing on external, shallow self-improvement knowledge, right? And it'll just enhance suffering and pain while you don't even notice it. And all of a sudden, maybe you might have like a moment that you feel extreme depression or anxiety or whatnot. You feel extreme, like empty feeling inside you, things like that. Because it doesn't really give you like tools to make it as yours. And I feel that all that sort of advice is like a full stop. It's just a statement. You do this, you will have this. This is the solution. So what happens is that when you hear that sort of advice, yeah, of course it makes sense, but it doesn't trigger anything within yourself, right? Because it's completely external advice. It's not something that arises within you. It's not a question mark advice. No. Whereas Eastern spirituality is constant questions. Why is it like this? Why do I feel like this? Like, why did I react that way in that moment? So it's just completely opposite from what we really need, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's built on the idea that if you acquire all these things, like, because basically you're being motivated and you're so-called helping your life to have a more materialistically rich life, right? That's what it's about in the end. Because, you know, even if we look at that, right, if we look at self-help and this and that, which, like, well, especially Westerners have merged that into Eastern spirituality, which has become sort of like New Age spirituality, which is about abundance and so forth and so on. And that doesn't help you anything, you know. That doesn't help you go to the deeper levels of yourself. It keeps you focused on the external world and that concept of winners and losers. Because if I do get that job, if I do get that car, the house, so forth and so on, I will be perceived as a winner. But if I ride a bike around, then I'm perceived as a loser. But if you're perfectly comfortable riding a bike around, and not that you're intentionally doing it, but that's just what you do, then something's gone right in your life, see? You don't need the Ferrari. You're just like, I'm just on the bike. It's cool, man. Like, this is my transport. You've done something right in your life. Because you don't need anything else to validate your existence.
That place is come from the complete understanding of your situation and your environment, immediate environment, right? And that is actually first and foremost thing to begin with, to understand your own environment instead of looking at Dwayne Rock Johnson's environment.
And it's a recognition that you're ordinary. And most of us are ordinary. And being ordinary is not a bad thing. You know, look at Zen and look at Taoism, right? And Vedanta. The whole philosophy is focused on ordinariness. If we look at the great Zen master Lin Chi's like, when asked about, what's, to be Buddha and this and that, what do I have to do? I eat your food, move your bowels. When you're tired, rest. When you want to wake up, wake up.
When you're hungry, you eat.
And then everyone's like, oh, this guy's... Whoosh. I mean, if he was talking these days, imagine he was lecturing at Harvard or something, trying to motivate young students. Lin Chi, what should we do? Well, when hungry, eat. Tired, sleep. Need to move your bowels. Make sure you go to the toilet. Is this a koan or something? No, it's about understanding that the ordinary life is the good life. The extraordinary life is self-torture. You are torturing yourself. you are trying to live up to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or someone like this that you've seen and you've heard their story, and you think, why not me? The mantra is we can all achieve anything we want to achieve. That's not the truth.
Yeah, sometimes like it's in a conversation with people, like it comes up talking about cars and things like that, right? And they often ask me like, what car do you drive? You know what? I don't even drive. So, we don't own a car, right? And the people like, what? Like, then isn't it too uncomfortable, like not to have your own car and this and that? Like, you know what? The buses and trains that take me everywhere that I want, right? If we really need, we can rent a car for like a few days or so, and that's all we need, really. Because we don't have a car, we can walk everywhere we want and get more exercises. And like, nothing wrong with it. Like,
We travel the world with no car.
there are tons of people that can get you places, right?
We've hitchhiked in many countries. Stranded in Myanmar somewhere, put your arm out.
Yeah.
Most people have a good heart. They
Get on the back of the truck.
get on the back of the truck and off you go. It's easy. It's not difficult.
That's why, and also like possessing a car is for some people it's like a big thing, and taking care of the car and give it a good wash every week, and and some people say that's their hobby, and like I'm like, oh, okay, well, okay.
You are possessed by the objects. See?
Yeah.
And that was a realization for me back in 2006 when I gave my car
See you later.
its burial. And I've never had a car ever since, as you know. And so when actually I got rid of that, because it is amazing how much a car does possess you, because you think about, like, you know, you got to get a service, you got to clean it, you know, and you ought to do those things if you have a car. Most people listening and watching this podcast probably have a car, and so you ought to get a service and this and that, because you know,
Otherwise it's going to break down.
But it is amazing how much you are possessed, in a sense, by that material possession. How much attention it needs, and it's an inanimate object.
Yeah.
And essentially, you're constantly projecting your mind onto something else when you should be projecting it into your inner world and dealing with what's going on the inside. And you and I are only talking about a car. Most people have not just a car; they have tons of other things, houses and
Boats.
Yeah, you name it.
You name it.
And so that it becomes a burden on the mind to deal with all of that. But according to the winners and losers society, is that if you have that, you're a winner. But the irony is you feel empty inside. You're not fulfilled. You're not living a full-fledged life. You're living the life of what society tells you should live, not the life that you feel resonates deeply within yourself. And that's very important, right? We're all trying to live the rich person's life, but that doesn't resonate deeply with all of us. But we think we ought to live that life because that's what's accepted. Because for whatever reason, the ordinary life is not good enough these days. But we've built a fantastic world to cater for ordinariness.
Yeah.
But we threw that snake in the grass where we said, no, the ordinary life is not good enough no more. We need to be extraordinary.
I think in actual reality, there's only ordinariness.
Of course.
But most of us deny to see it that way. We want to be a winner, right? That's why, we throw snakes in the grass. Whereas if we decide to see there's only ordinariness, and there's tremendous beauty in it, and there is no more depression, there is no more anxiety, there is no more of competitiveness that you feel that you have to keep up your appearances in social medias and whatnot. There's none of that, and you are perfectly fine as you are, really.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything to look certain way.
Well, how many emails now have I received, especially for fasting the mind and effortless living, about how those books have changed their lives, because they were stuck in a loop of trying to achieve something in their life according to what society thinks is acceptable. But then, as you know, fasting the mind, effortless living is just like, don't worry about any of that nonsense. Like, keep the mind pristine, keep it pure, and trust life. And actually, that unties the knot in your heart, you see. Like Lao Tzu says, like the chase and the hunt maddens our hearts. He's talking about this 2,500 years ago. But if we showed him now the current reality, he's just like, man, where can I go? Is there a plane? Is there a rocket to Mars or something? I need to get out of here ASAP. Because the chase and the hunt is not just maddening our hearts, it's making us sick. Yeah. So in yearning for that life, we are becoming sick. And that the proof of that is in the drastic increase in the rates of suicide and depression. And the amount of people who suffer from stress and anxiety is the proof that life is not the actual correct way to live. But to trust in life and just accepting your life as it is actually the great relief you have. You know, understanding your ordinariness and actually embracing that, and getting out of this mindset that you ought to do something to be famous or wealthy, and all of this garbage that we're constantly fed by all of these, by the media and by self-help gurus and so forth and so on.
There's this very distinctive thing that I think we need to address. The self-improvement industry gives you a lot of motivation and whatnot, but eventually self-improvement books only put light on what you lack.
Yep.
Right? Mm. Whereas Eastern spirituality gives you recognition of what you already have.
Yep.
So that you get to realize that how much you need to trust the life itself and trust yourself, your intuitive feelings and intuitive pull to something, right? That's something fundamental point, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah, the self-improvement industry shows you what you don't have. That's the thing. Like, or you read and hear all these stories, the success stories, right? Mm-hmm. It only gives you a feeling of emptiness. It can only give you a feeling of emptiness, right? Mm-hmm. Because it shows you what you don't have. And I think that's how they market.
Yeah, they do. They prey on your life.
Yes, they know that people want to hear that sort of stories to promote what people have, which most people don't have, right? And so that buying those books or go to those sort of lectures, they boost you and give you some sort of a bit of a lie. It's a fake belief that you achieved that you were lacking from reading those books, from going to those lectures, right? I think that's why we see these you mentioned, with big seminar with 2,000-3,000 of people in front of this person, and people I don't know, they go really get hyped up and they're like, oh yeah, I can do it, you say you can do it, I can do it, whatever. It's a
bit cringy.
It's a bit of a circus, And from joining that sort of activity and lecture, you get boosted and you feel so high, right? And you feel like you achieve that things that you always wanted to achieve in that moment. But that moment, a lot of people don't realize it. It's only temporarily, though. So when you finish that lecture and whatever, a program they have for days or something, so once you finish, you'll go back home. It lasts how long, you think? A month?
Yeah, a month. Wow.
less,
Less probably.
then like everything becomes normal.
Because life takes over, right? So,
Exactly. Then like you go back to the normal state of being depressed as
depressed
hell.
as hell, yeah. It's, you're not getting grounded in those sort of,
Exactly.
from those knowledge and from those seminars.
Yeah.
But you raise a good point, because Eastern spirituality and philosophy is more about being grateful, where self-help, self-improvement keeps you hungry, never satisfied. And that's a dangerous place to be when you're never satisfied, because you will actually never be satisfied, and you'll live your life and you will die in that mentality. Till your deathbed, you'll be working on something, never be content, you see. But Eastern spirituality is telling you to be grateful for what you have. And most of, as you know, most of the great gratitude meditation practices, like in Taoism and Buddhism and Hinduism, every morning is about focusing on what you have and being grateful for that, not what you don't have. So, I'd be grateful for you being in my life and all the people listening and watching, just simple things that we have here, extremely grateful, but not putting my mind on things I don't have, because I don't need them and I don't have them. So why should your mind be occupied with that? But the way society is oriented is that they keep you hungry, keep you starving for more, and so you're constantly yearning for more, right? You're yearning for the next car, the next woman or man. You know what I mean? You're not even satisfied in your own relationships. You want new friends. I mean, it gets pretty nutty. Yeah. But that's the way. That's the psychosis that is being produced by this. This is the psychopathies that are happening because of that, the social norm of winners and losers. And it doesn't work. And it's not producing a healthy society. It's creating sick people. But the thing is that what you and I are talking about is not going to be put out in the media and put out on a large scale, because the whole system is faulty and it's corrupt. Like, even if you go to a psychologist, they're still operating from that place too. They're trying to get you to like a place of motivation, and sure, I'm sure there's some psychologists out there that will try to deal with deeper things, but in the end of the day, they're dealing with those deeper things to try and get you out there and do things.
It's almost giving them false hypnosis.
Yeah.
Just for that moment to fix the feeling that those people have.
Yeah. But it's like what you said. If you went to a guru or you went to a sage, they would say, "What do you have in your life?" "Well, I have all this and that." "What's the problem?" And then, like, when people sit back, "Oh, well, but I don't have this other stuff." What's
Yeah,
why is that actually a problem? That you don't have that? I don't have Mars. I don't have Jupiter. I mean, but they're still doing their thing. It's not a problem. So why are you looking at other things as if you need that to validate your existence? You don't. You've bought into an illusion. You bought into that hypnosis of the society that is telling you that you ought to have this, and this is what validates your existence, and it doesn't. Eastern spirituality is teaching you to be completely content with absolutely nothing. Not even your persona. You got to drop that. You got to be completely content being just the pure self, pure awareness. And if you can reside and abide in that, nothing is going to affect you in your life. You won't suffer any stress, no anxiety. That cannot be cultivated within yourself, because you're not attracted to the shiny things outside. You're not maddening your heart in that process.
Yeah, that just reminds me of the documentary you watched together about Kumbh Mela. It happens about every 12 years in India, northern India. Yeah, something very that struck my mind was that the Nagas Nagasas. So it's naked sadhus. Maybe a lot of people who heard about those people. Naked sadhus with the really long hair and just the ashes all over their body, and like they I didn't know like so many rules they had to follow and jumping hoops to become that. Like they had to follow certain rules for a certain amount of time to become the Nagasas. And you can't sleep. You can only sleep on the soil with the thin sheet of fabric on top, and you're not allowed to cut your hair and overcome all these physical, sexual desires and senses and whatnot. And because I thought they chose to be a naked sadhu, just be naked and then put ashes all over, and you become one. That's what I actually thought. But even their motivation behind it is so even more extraordinary, that they understand that what this material world does to all of us, and they voluntarily say no to that, and they just go the other extreme to live with and merge with Brahman. And that's all there is for them, and that's the purpose of life, their life, and they are extremely fulfilled and happy from being Naga Sadhu. They pay immense respect to River Ganga, and just that was something. I mean, it's very extreme, but there's a lot to learn from that sort of mindset.
A lot of those spiritual paths, especially the Hindu paths like the Shaiva, Nagasadhus and Avadhuts, and it's all about complete negation of the world, actually, and the dissolution of the I. It's for the purpose of the dissolution of the I, right? Because the I is the one that's attracted to what we're talking about. And so you're overcoming all of those material needs, even like you said, taking away beds and clothes. You're taking away clothes as well, you know what I mean? And you're bathing only in ash, and this is your life going forward.
They're not allowed to possess anything.
Yeah. They might have a cloth or this and that, so they don't get.
That's it, really.
So if they're traveling from northern India to southern India, they don't get arrested in Chennai or something like that. But in India, you wouldn't get arrested walking around naked. But so you're. Their life is centered on lack. We ought to have nothing. Not lack in the other way.
No. We can't have
anything. Yes, I want nothing. I want lack.
Yeah. And they're fully really full power on it. Like they are just so high on that energy.
Yeah. Well, they've been around. I mean, those paths, not just the Naga Sadhu path, but the other Sadhu paths as well, have been around for thousands of years, and it's an intense, powerful spiritual path. Especially if you look at the path of an Avadhut, so a wandering sage, their whole focus is just on the dissolution of the I, and just living away from society, and just always in constant abidance in Brahman, the constant abidance. And they're not playing any sort of spiritual game of one-upsmanship, how all of these new ages and that carried on these days. I can hang in society and be enlightened as well. Sure. You're talking about yourself again. That's the first problem. So they're not under any of that illusion. So they divorce themselves from society, and they remain in bliss. And if you've had the good fortune to come across individuals like that, then being in their presence is transformative.
Very powerful.
Yeah. And so, obviously we all have that opportunity, but not all of us are going to go to that extreme. You and I are not going to go to that extreme. But if you follow, especially if you look at it from the Buddha's perspective of not falling into either extreme, because he went to that extreme, and he had the other extreme too. He had wealth and prosperity and so forth and so on. You find this middle way of between extremes, where there's a balance, where it's more of a balanced life, but it's an ordinary life, you see, and you're completely comfortable and content. You don't need to go to that extreme or to that extreme. You're like in the center point where you're completely comfortable. You don't need material wealth. It's like what the Gnostics say. The Gnostics will say there's 3 things that you need: food, clothing, and shelter, and that's it. If you focus on the bare minimum of food, clothing, and shelter, shanti, life is good. But if you go outside of that, life becomes a problem. Maybe if you retract that, it probably doesn't become much of a problem, but it may become a problem too. Because there are some sadhus who, we need to be honest, some sadhus do suffer because they don't, some of them don't have a lot of nutrition and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, majority of them are living well. Because of India's orientation on spirituality, people who take that path are well respected, in society. So ashrams will give free food and clothing and so forth and so on, if they want clothes. So you have that. You have that opposite path of complete negation of the winner and loser mentality. The problem is if you put one of the Nagas sadhus in somewhere like Australia, America, or Europe, or somewhere like that, they get arrested because it wouldn't be understood. Why does this guy not want anything? It would be completely confusing. If you remember, we've taken groups to Tiruvannamalai, Arunachala, where a lot of sadhus live at the foot of Arunachala, because Arunachala is deemed as a manifestation of Shiva. And so a lot of sadhus will reside at the base there. And there's the famous Pradakshina road, which goes around Arunachala, and devotees walk around that, every day, but there's every full moon people will walk around, especially. And we've taken groups there on spiritual retreats and that, and one individual said, what are all these losers doing, Well, they don't have a home and this and that. The Westerner here, we won't mention their name, but do you see like the lack of understanding of the value in that path because of what we're talking about? See, you ought to have riches, you ought to have house, car, you ought to have shelter. There's all of these pre-existing rules that we've been inculcated with in society. And so when we see something that's diametrically opposed to that, we have a nervous reaction and we just can't understand it.
What's wrong with them?
What's wrong with them?
They don't have families. Or...
Yeah. And we've heard this all around the world. We've heard people even in Thailand call monks losers and stuff like that. And it's usually Westerners because they can't quite, they don't get it. They can't grasp the concept of negation. They can't grasp the concept of renunciation. They just don't get it. They don't see that there's a value in it. And when you pull them into that path and you show them that life and you take them on a sadhana, like a lengthy sadhana, a lengthy spiritual retreat, then the layers start to peel. And then they understand, They may not go to that length of a sadhu, but they begin to understand, right, that that's actually the healthy way to live. I'm living an unhealthy way.
Yeah, they are the winners.
They are the winners. They're the real winners.
Yeah.
They've fully accepted themselves at their core. They've come back to the what am I, and they're not worried about the who they are. And it's our in the modern society, it's our lack of acceptance of ourselves that is making us sick, right? And so especially those sadhus and monks and all of the people that follow a spiritual path sincerely, they've fully accepted themselves and actually are seeking to dissolve that socialization that's been imposed on them, because they have identified that gives them suffering and actually brings them illness. It's very important, right?
The place like India, I think it's I wish India stays as an authentic India and don't get too much of that sort of materialistically driven ideas, because it's a very unique place where a lot of people actually pay so much respect to those people who live sadhu's life.
Yep.
Just like most of Indian people, wealthy people, well-educated people, even those people acknowledge how important they are in the world, and also they pay a lot of respect as well. So in the Western world, you might get arrested or considered as a crazy people, or things loser and things like that. But we've witnessed it with the direct eyes that they get so much respect from local people and sometimes foreigners too. Like you would offer like some little material possessions or food or anything. In some cases, they deny it because they don't need it. They just, no, it's okay, like, you know. And they're completely fine with not having much. And that's been respected. And I think there's so much important values in that society in India.
Definitely. And Asia in general, right? Like there's just a deep respect for that. And it comes from like the humility of that place too, you know, like in a deference as well. Like the deference meaning that, you know, obviously like being able to defer to someone that you respect, and so you're willing to take the, you know, more of a lower path compared to that individual and show them gratitude. You know, like for example, like when, especially like say in Thailand, when the monks come out for morning alms and in the community, and then there's no sense of pride in the local village people or disrespect. They give the food that they've cooked to the monks, and then they bow down on their knees, and then the monks, you know, chant, and they take the blessing, and it's such a beautiful synergy of that spirituality interwoven with the culture, and there's a deference there where someone's just, you know, completely fine to take a lower road, a submissive path, and give gratitude to those individuals who are following that path. There's a respect there because they know deeply, as within India with the sadhus and the yogis and that, people in society know deeply that they are doing the great work. They are the ones trying to attain moksha in this life, and we ought to pay them respect. But the problem is, as with what you said, is if we look at places, if we look at Mumbai, right? If we look at Mumbai, and you and I have seen this, is that there's a sentiment developing where there's a lack of respect towards yogis and sadhus. Now people start calling them bums and beggars, they're losers in society. And where is it coming from? It's coming from that individualistic mentality, which has a lack, which has too much pride, too much ego. And so when you're from that place, you look at everything from your perspective and you judge it accordingly. And you're out of sync with the way things work or the way things are in that world, you know.
Yeah, there's a big growing population in India, and a lot of them even abandon Hinduism, they promote communism and Christianity and whatnot. And
it's worrisome, actually.
Yeah, it is worrisome. They almost seem to look down on their own tradition and just to follow what the rest of the world thinks is good.
Yeah.
And that's not quite right, I don't think.
No. Well, they're falling into this thing that we're talking about. They're falling into this path of self-help and being the coolest in the school and so forth and so on, you know. They're falling into that path. And so when you do fall into that category, what happens? You become arrogant, you become self-centered, it becomes more seems ridiculous to you. You see,
We know this with Indian people. They have that very like a genetic. I think it's genetic temperament. Whatever they think is good, they just take on board like 1,000%. Like this is it. Like, this is it for my rest of my life. Like it's so they take that way as well, right? Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
There's an innocence there.
Yeah, there's innocence there. Yes.
But the thing is that, especially with what we're talking about, when you start to bring in that winner-loser dichotomy, is that is toxic in that world, because there's a lack of acceptance of yourself and also a lack of acceptance of the world. And so when you don't trust yourself or the world, technically you're an ill person. You are sick. You're out of sync. You're out of sync with yourself. You're out of sync with the world. There's no way that you can first of all, you can't benefit yourself, and if you can't benefit yourself, you can't benefit the world. And so what's going to happen? Well, there's just going to be conflict out there, right? You're going to see the world as in opposition to yourself from your own mentality, but you're also at conflict with yourself as well.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't accepted yourself. If you haven't accepted yourself, you can't accept the world. This is a big problem. Whereas if we look at Eastern spirituality and why you and I have been receiving a lot of messages from the podcast, a lot of people have said that things have changed their life and this and that, is because Eastern spirituality and philosophy, not that a lot of, there's a lot of people who teach New Age Eastern spirituality out there, you and I teach the real deal, is that it's about that deep understanding of yourself and pulling apart that winner-loser mentality and coming back to the core of your being and being completely comfortable there. And if you want to do things in your life, do it. But that's not going to define who you truly are. It will never define who you truly are. And if you're seeking acceptance or respect from people because of what you do, that's a pretty empty game. There's I think it was, maybe it was Eleanor Roosevelt. There was someone of that nature that said this quote. It was an interesting quote about what you have to realize is that at the end of the day, no one really cares too much about you. But we're going around every day thinking that everyone's looking at us and caring a lot about ourselves. But it's you caring about yourself. You're so absorbed in your own self-image. No one gives a crap. You know what I mean? No one really does give a crap. And I'm not saying that in a very negative way. This should liberate you that no one's paying too much attention to you. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. Don't overestimate yourself.
Yeah.
Because billions and billions of people have died in this world and you don't even know their name. They've gone. That's it. It's finished.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they lived a good life, and their immediate life around them was great. And that's what's important, that ordinariness. But don't get far ahead of yourself and think that, everyone's paying attention to what you're doing and this and that. They're not. They're not. Even in some sense, the most famous person in the world, people can't pay attention to what they're doing all the time, and they don't know. Unless the gossip mag says something. But even then, it's a fleeting news article, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just they want that momentary compliment of how they look and what they've achieved and whatnot. And again, it's a wrong drive, wrong motivation. Yeah. It might make a dent initially when you think that nobody really actually cares who you are and how you look. But that is the reality, and we should be able to accept it. And so that leaves a question that then, why do I do things then? Say for example, for you, why do you want to write books? For example, right? And Obviously, that's because you enjoy writing books first of all,
Yeah.
and enjoy cultivating knowledge. And books are like just the outcome of studying things. Like once you gain good amount of knowledge, you will come up with your own ideas, and you have like that's almost like a natural instinctual thing, because the human beings are creative creature. That we want to create things. The bottom line, we have to enjoy what we do, not to achieve something from it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Enjoyment. It's like when Cal Newport went to see that blacksmith. And no one knows this blacksmith. He's just a blacksmith. He's an ordinary blacksmith. And he makes these swords, and no one really cares about these swords. But they sell for a fortune, you know what I mean? But he doesn't sell many. Because, well, who wants swords? You know what I mean? Like we don't live in the 16th century. So,
We
but
got guns.
but anyway, he makes these beautifully crafted swords, right? And when Cal went to see him, because Cal wanted to see, well, he wanted to understand like why craftsmen do these certain things, and then he watched the guy during the process, like of a few days of making this sword, and it's an arduous journey. You know what I mean? Like you're banging steel around, you're heating it, you're banging it, you're heating it. It's not an easy process. But then Cal said there was a point when it came out of the thing, when it had taken shape, and he put it up
Under a light.
and the look in his eye, he said that's what you can't buy. That's kind of satisfaction from his own craft. It's not a sense of it. It's not even achievement. It's like it's hard to say what that actually is, but there's a sense of awe from having had that experience. I've had that through writing books. You know what I mean? Like finished a chapter, or maybe wrote a paragraph, or completed the book and went over it and went,
pretty good.
There's a sense of contentment with it, as it is. It doesn't have to be published and this and that. Obviously, getting published and all that is all well and good, but there's a sense of gratitude there.
Gratitude, fulfillment.
Fulfillment. Yeah, that's the right word. Ananda Kumaraswamy once said it, and I'm botching this. I'm paraphrasing a little bit this quote, but he said that, because someone asked him about writing books, and because he was a prolific scholar and writer, and he was kind of like, it's kind of him understanding his own soul coming down into words, which is helping other people understand their own soul. It's his own exploration into his art or craft, which is actually helping other people, and that's kind of, I think, what's happening within. Well, let's exclude pop culture, but within real art and creativity, that's kind of what's happening. You're exploring yourself, and if that reaches other people, then that's all well and good. But if it doesn't, or it just reaches a few people, that's still well and good too. But like as you said, like this impulse to create is you're not doing it to achieve. We all have an impulse to make something, but if the impulse, this is where the problem happens, right? The impulse to create then gets commingled with achievement, recognition, fame, fortune, and that's the manifestation of pop culture, pop music. So yeah, Eastern spirituality is just about being completely comfortable with who you are, and as we were just saying, you are kind of in harmony with that nishkarma karma attitude in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is teaching Arjuna, teaching him how to just act, but don't be attached to the fruits of your own action. Don't start to develop that really toxic mentality of I ought to achieve something from things that I do. You don't have to. I mean, you wash the dishes, right? What's the achievement? There's no achievement. You wash the dishes because they're dirty. That's why you wash the dishes. So why are we overlaying this achievement thing onto the more attractive things that we do? Like writing books or creating music or so forth and so on. it's because the society is telling you you need to do that. And we need to start to have a distance from that if we want to be sane and healthy. And all of the Eastern spiritual paths, first and foremost, are systems to make you sane and healthy. And to be sane and healthy is not to be caught up in the toxicity of being a person and the toxicity of what culture thinks that person should be. You're distancing yourself from both of them. You're trying to understand your persona as much as possible, you know, your genetic makeup, your conditioning, and so forth and so on. But once you start to peel that onion, then you see the external that's trying to you know, that process will also break down, you know, and you'll begin to distance yourself further from those social norms that are being superimposed onto our mind, you know.
Ultimately, that path leads all of us to be authentically happy.
Yes.
It's got nothing to do with what society tells you how to be and what to do. It's that ultimate happiness and contentment, fulfillment. And from that place, we can only be able to live our like a life that's like well, Allah once said like there's art to living, right? That's the life itself becomes reflection of who you are, really. Yeah, and from that place, you don't even need any kind of acknowledgement or approval or by anyone or, you know, or by society or nothing. Because in the end, we all realize that's kind of pointless.
Yeah.
Like, we sometimes have that sort of feeling, why did I even do it? You know, because you know that motivation and drive was the wrong intention, you know. And I think, like, just like myself, that because my parents were, you know, they were also had a lack of knowledge, so that try to really achieve what's been accepted as good in society. So it took a long time, I think, to come to that kind of realization. And also it's still sometimes struggling to keep the focus on gratitude and whatnot. But it's something we need to constantly remind ourselves. Yeah.
Well, true confidence is built on what you were saying. True confidence is built on the fact that you don't need anything. And you can be completely content as you are without all of these additions that society think that you need. That's actually true confidence. That confidence we see in the famous people who have achieved a lot and this and that is actually not real confidence. That's a confidence built on a low self-esteem. It's built on a lack of confidence, you see.
Yeah, we think that to have more confidence in ourselves, like we need to do these things, like you have to have more experience and like, I don't know, accumulate more related knowledge and whatnot, but that's not really it. Yeah. True confidence is just being comfortable with who you really are.
Yeah.
And that is completely opposite from what society wants of you.
Well, I've heard many times people say, "Oh, look at that self-help guru, he's got extreme confidence," and it's like, no. That's a veil. That's not real confidence. That's, first of all, he or she is good at managing themselves in front of people. They are very intellectual and very calculated and very measured because that's what they do. They're motivational speakers. Yeah. Anything we can get good at, they've just cultivated themselves a certain way. But you bet that they got there because they had a low self-esteem, they needed respect, they needed love, and now they're in that position. And so that confidence you see is just a part of repetition, a part of them comfortable with doing that thing for a certain amount of time. But how many times have we heard the self-help guru and this and that have suffered, that have suffered in their life, right? For example, let's look at Tony Robbins, right? Tony Robbins, as brilliant as you think he is, he goes to Ken Wilber for knowledge. Ken Wilber doesn't have thousands of people around him, but Tony goes to him for deep insights into the nature of reality. And it's not saying that what Tony does is wrong or anything like that. He does motivate a lot of people and so forth and so on. But even himself as a self-help guru is going and seeking the Eastern spiritual knowledge to gain deeper insights. He's going to Varanasi. He's going to these places and looking for a deeper insight into life. And that says a lot, right? That says a lot. Because Tony, being the brilliant man he is and all of the knowledge and that he has, he's still looking at that Eastern path because that's where the gold is, But like someone like Ken Wilber, he's definitely not marketable in, he had a time, right? Like when Buddhism and that came about, and which had a kind of a boon in Western society. Ken has a lot of health issues at the moment, but it didn't last because people continually fall for this winner and loser mentality.
And we know that Ken Wilber is strongly against that type of things.
Well, his whole system, the whole integral theory is built on getting away from, obviously, having a social self, but to have a social self from his system of thought is you have to understand your true self. You can't. It's like Zhuangzi, right? Like to play the role well, you need to understand yourself first and understand that the role is only being played. It can never define who you truly are. But society may demand that you have a role,
Yeah.
So that's that information. I think people, especially in the West, they understand it and they take it on board for a certain period of time, but they get overwhelmed with this mantra, like the General Patton's mantra in the film. Americans love a winner and will not tolerate a loser. This is not just Americans, this is all around the world now, this competitive mantra being drilled into us. So when people come across Taoism or Buddhism or Hinduism and any of their subpaths, then it feels good and people know it's true, but then they get overwhelmed. You look at the decade I've been doing this, right? A lot of people think I've only been doing this since the age of the YouTube, been doing this, but long before that, lectures and so forth and so on. And how many people have we seen fall by the wayside because they got overwhelmed with that same mantra? They say to me, they know what I'm saying is true, and it brings freedom to their life, but then you see them fall away.
There's always a but.
There's always a but. Or and then.
Yeah, like they know it's important. And they know it's the right thing to do, to follow the path, that path. But these, I don't know, that became strong conditioning, I think, to everyone. To be someone, achieve someone, make a lot of money, this kind of stuff.
Well, you said it best, the but, right?
Yeah.
So they go, I know that's true, but how is that going to affect my immediate life?
Yeah.
You see? So we've fallen into this very pragmatic way of thinking in the world. And being pragmatic at times can be beneficial and is beneficial. But if you're applying that all the time, and if you're applying that sort of mentality onto how you ought to live and your position in life, then you're going to come across a lot of problems, because the nature of yourself and your happiness, your true happiness, doesn't matter if you're a practical person or not. You have to find that and you have to live from that place. And if you don't, because you're coming from the but, how is this going to affect my immediate life, then you're going to continue to be sick and you're going to continue to suffer because you're still hungry. You're not satisfied. Oh, Guyang is right, but I need that job because that's going to fulfill my material needs. You know, it's a certain level of wealth and, you know.
Yeah, I think still a lot of people think of Eastern spirituality in a way that they want to get something out of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They know it's important for their own well-being and to fulfill their life and whatnot. But in the end, we all want something from it. But not necessarily to think that we are going to get something out of it. It's more like getting something out of it is like a very small byproduct of following the path, I think. If you were to, I mean, we are all in society, living ordinary life. And so when we say that, yeah, that's all well and good, but what that's going to benefit my immediate reality? Well, there's a heap of things actually you can say.
Of course.
Because when you make your inner well-being priority, you can change a lot of things in your daily life. For example, you maybe get up half an hour earlier, right? And do a simple, I don't know, stretches or meditate or just have a little moment every day because you want to bring that path into your life. You know, you want to incorporate that into your life, right? Changing like a small habits can be a really good start. And that make that as a priority. You start the day right, then pretty much the rest of the day you will be in a good mood. And whatever happens to you, if that's a negative thing, you will find it much easier to navigate through, right? Instead, your usual self would just react and get really cranky and angry and blame someone and, you know, etc., all that type of things. But you won't react like that anymore. And eventually, we might realize that actually it's a really small part of our life. That's not everything. No. It's small realizations. That small realizations eventually lead to a bigger realizations about ourselves, right? So getting something out of you will get something out of it eventually. But it's just not immediate. It's not like you winning a lottery, that's all. No. But it's all for your own good. It is all for your own good. And it only needs a bit of effort, commitment. Again, that's all good for you.
Well, the true answer is, like everything you said, if someone asked me, what am I going to get out of this, Jason? How is this going to benefit my life, Eastern spirituality? How is it practical? Okay, you want the answer? If you get that job or you don't get that job, you're completely fine. If you have a good day or a bad day, you're still completely fine. If this happens or that happens, you're still completely fine. You don't suffer. Yeah. You see, you're grounded, you're centered. You're not attached to things, and you're not attached to an outcome of how life should be. You are completely settled. That's how it's going to benefit your life. You won't hate anymore. You will love. You will see the beauty in the world, and the world is beautiful from this perspective. Don't listen to the media and all of the merchants of fear. The world is a wonderful place. No matter if it's in a pandemic or whatever, it's a wonderful place, and don't let anyone tell you different. That's how it benefits your life. Doesn't matter what happens in your life. You're perfectly fine. Shanti.
I mean, we watched not too long ago, second time around, I thought that was the first time. The beautiful mind. Yeah. There's one scene that this young boy shows this tape he filmed to his girlfriend. It was plastic bag.
American Beauty. You should be.
Beautiful mind, I said.
American Beauty.
American Beauty, that's right.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. American Beauty, yes. So the plastic bag just flying around in front of a house, and that's all he filmed. But plastic bag is, wind blows that way, it goes that way, and it just goes with where the wind blows, and just flying around here and there and everywhere. He saw that was something beautiful, right? And following that, the Eastern spiritual path is to allow you to see simple things in that way.
Yep.
It shifts your perspective in life. And that's a somewhat quite enlightening thing, you know. And that's what we need to do.
Well, that's one of the most profound scenes in any film, that simple scene where just a plastic bag is floating around and he's saying, look how beautiful it is. Like, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever filmed. And like you said, it's just moving around and it has no aim. It's, like this, the beauty in that, if you can see. The thing is that it's not even about changing even our perspective. It's about bringing reality.
That's right.
We have a perspective. That's the problem, which is a winner and loser perspective, which keeps us away from seeing the world as it truly is.
And he said in the movie, I forget these.
Yeah. And we do.
Yeah. And I need to remember.
Yeah, I need to remember.
Yeah.
That's one of the most powerful lines, right? I need to remember. Eastern spirituality is about the remembering, the smriti, about the remembrance. You need to remember. I need to remember that all is Brahman, all is Tao. How do I remember? Well, you're not going to remember if you're in this game, in this game of one-upsmanship, and you're not humble. You come back to the remembering when you lower yourself, you become humble, and you want to understand your true nature, which is the nature of the whole universe. Where we are that tip of the fractal with the whole inner structure of the universe flowing through us as consciousness. And it's about eliminating this over-identification where the external and the internal is kind of commingled, which creates this ego, which then thinks that it's in opposition to the world, and then you ought to be in competition with other people and be someone. That has to be eliminated, because that's not true. That's not the way things are. The way things are is the plastic bag just floating around. That's the real reality. That's the beauty of life, and that's the beauty of our own life. And that's what Eastern spirituality and that actually provides. It doesn't even provide, it shows you how reality actually is. This is how reality is. It's not the way that you thought it was. So why are you trying to be this extraordinary person? Nobody is special, you see. And this is a terrible thing for especially self-help and self-motivation. When you come along and say nobody is special, they start to hold their wallets to self-help gurus. They're like, how's that going to help anyone? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like when Bill Hicks had that set back in the early 90s, and he was like, I can't stand when parents say that their kids are special. No one's effing special, like you are not special. Your child is not special. Yeah, and he's right.
Like, whoa.
It may come across as like being this negative set, but he's trying to relay a message, and it's a very Taoist message that as humans we think that we are more special than everything, and especially ourselves as a persona, we think we're more special than even other people, but we are no more special than an ant. That's the Taoist perspective. An ant has a place in the universe, a human has a place in the universe. We have different functions and different reasons for existence. We're all part of the Tao. Yeah. But you get outside of that understanding when you think you're special. And this is the problem with this self-help and self-motivation. They're trying to tell you that you are special, and you're not. And it's completely fine to be ordinary. If you want to be wise like Lin Chi didn't give a rat's if he was special or not special. He was just taking a dump, eating food, sleeping, and that's his existence. He knew that there was nothing more extraordinary actually than that. He's looking at the very simple things in life as extraordinary. Like, he's probably sitting on a toilet going, man, this is so wonderful.
Such a great feeling.
Such a great feeling.
Such a great
Such a
feeling.
great aroma.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like we get outside of that when we start to think we're this special entity, and we're not. You know, it's the height of a crazy world to create a world based on extraordinariness when the majority of people are ordinary. That's the height of crazy. That can only create insane people.
Oh yeah.
Because think about it, it can only create insane people. Because most people are ordinary. And ordinariness is a wonderful thing. Extraordinariness actually, in some sense, can highlight someone's low self-esteem. Because they're trying to gain love, gain respect from doing things. But we ought to be that person on the bicycle.
Yeah.
Perfectly comfortable riding through the city. No need for a Ferrari and this and that. No matter how big their bank account is. And it's not a choice of false modesty. It's a choice of that's just what they need. There's no forethought into, like, I need extra things to make myself feel loved or comfortable. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting that people do extraordinary things, right? When you look at those people and their background and whatnot, their motivation and whatnot, they're extremely ordinary people.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the extraordinary. Yeah.
Extraordinary, yeah.
So when we think of like great musicians or any type of artist, painter or writer or great thinker, innovator, all these type of people, they never, the authentic ones, they never consider themselves as special individual.
No.
They just did what they enjoyed to do, and they gave everything. Of course, there's a very catering environment, right? From good support from parents and whatnot. They're just extremely ordinary people who follow their love, their passion.
And they got paid for it.
And those people are more often than not to appear in front of the public, you know. That's what something we need to realize.
That's a great point, love.
Yeah.
Because society's saying you ought to be like that famous person, but that famous person is no better than anyone else. And actually what's frustrating for the famous person, as you know, is that they suffer a lot because people project a lot of unnecessary adulation onto them and treat them differently. And then that famous person finds it hard to have genuine relationships in life, genuine friendships. It really becomes that way because of this so-called extraordinary person that the society is telling other people that they are. But the famous person themselves know that, well, I loved acting, for example, and I found it interesting and creative. And I just got paid for it and I became famous. It wasn't my choice. But then society and the media start saying, look at this guy or look at this girl. And you should be like them. And then other people start to think like that, and then they project their own illusions onto that famous person.
Yeah.
They always say that you should meet your idol. Because when you meet your idol, you'll realize that they're no more special than you are.
Right.
They're no more special than you are. They're just good at something. They're not better than you. They're just good at something.
Yeah.
You might be good at making banana smoothies. They can't make a banana smoothie like you.
Exactly.
But making banana smoothies is not valued as much as making a Hollywood blockbuster.
Yeah.
So before anyone projects their own illusions and fantasies onto their idols, remember, everyone's not special. No one is special. I mean, no one is special, I should say, you know, and they are just as ordinary as what you are, but they are, for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, because society is focused on winners and losers, they create them and manufacture them as a winner, as opposed to someone who is a loser, who might be a furniture removalist. But there are good furniture removalists out there, right? Why don't we start praising the furniture removalist? Like, man, he does a good job, does a really good job. Never scratches the furniture, gets it in the house. But that's not the society that we are not creating a society for ordinariness. We're creating a society for extraordinariness.
When I come back home from going out and come back home and always just walking around, always see this same group of council workers around, just collecting rubbish and emptying bins and things like that. And because we live in close to the city, there's a lot of human traffic and whatnot. So there's the scenes that you don't want to see is happening around here. So I sometimes think that, like exactly the same individual clean up the pavement and picking up the broken glass bottles and things like that. And I sometimes look at those people's face that it doesn't seem very happy and everyday thing and had enough and that type of tiring look in their faces. And I was just thinking, how many people really give much attention to that sort of people? Because to be honest, not many people want to have that sort of job, right? But they, because of their circumstances and whatnot, and they became to be a council worker, and they do that for a living. But that kind of things, I think we need to give more attention and gratitude.
Yeah, more praise for.
Yeah, more praise. Because
without
that's the thing. Without those people, we might live in just a dump every corner, to be honest. Yeah. And we need to give more attention to those things that we think that's something for granted, yes. Yeah. That's something, of course, we take it we have those workers to, make it clean, whatever. Yeah, but when you think a bit more deeply, not many people want to do that sort of work. And we don't pay too much attention and we don't give much gratitude. And I think we need to give more attention and see things a bit more deeply, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. Just to same as our own life as well. Pay attention to things that you take it for granted. And that's what changes your perspective in things, I think.
Yeah. Well, the ordinary life is the good life. That has to be the mentality. Yeah. The good life is the ordinary life. And so, as those council workers, if they understood that, they may approach their job differently. Yeah. But also, as you said, they may get a lot more respect from people too.
That's right.
Thank you for doing this. And, you and I have lived in Asia, and people, especially in Southeast Asia and South Asia, people get respected for their jobs, for their contribution to society. They get a lot of gratitude. No, not all the time, but they are noticed more than say in the West, where we'll just that's just their job, and whatever. You don't think too much about it. Yeah. But as we always talk about India, but as you see in India especially, is that for an Indian, if they get a job, even if they how many young boys and young men may shine shoes on the street in India, or may cut hair on the street, and though we may think it's
such a simple job, and like it's not extraordinary at all. But when we see those individuals working, they really love what they do. They do, right? Like when you see the guys, like you go and get a haircut from a guy on the street, and you get in a conversation, like you just know that he just loves it. You know what I mean? Like, and it's kind of strange because if you look at someone who's in a hairdresser or a barbershop in the West, it's not that they love it; it's kind of their job, and there's this different thing, right?
Much more self-interested.
Much more self-interested. Where India itself has kind of embraced the ordinariness, because everyone is just part of Shiva. It's not like, well, there is that happening with the Mumbai crowd and some of the Delhi crowd, where there's this so-called extraordinariness with people, but there is a deep understanding that we are all not special, but we're all part of something that's much greater than our own personal selves. And so they have a deep appreciation of what they do, which is actually really overwhelming to see. Like how many times you and I, we go and just hang out with the chaiwala, and the chaiwala absolutely just such an intrinsic element of the fabric of society, a chaiwala, and they understand that they are that, and then that's actually gives them a lot of peace of mind.
They have such innocent heart inside.
That's a good point, right? Because if you keep that mindset, you have an innocent heart. Isn't it funny that when you're constantly hungry and you're trying to be someone in your life and this and that, you lose your innocence. It's just a byproduct of it. A lot of people say, why are rich people constantly a-holes, and why is that one person like that? Intrinsically, they're not. But they are hungry. And when you're hungry, you don't consider the collateral damage. You're just going guns a-blazing ahead to achieve your goals. But when you take goals out of the equation, you keep a childlike mind. Interesting thing, isn't it?
Yeah, we all need to understand that. I think that self-motivational material is just gonna make us to have a hungry mind constantly. It never gonna fulfill, actually. We can read tons of self-motivational books, but it won't be able to compare any one chapter of Tao Te Ching, for example.
No. Couldn't give you that.
Yes. It only gonna enhances your hunger, I think.
Well, like I said, there's only two types of books. How to be a millionaire and how to get out of low self-esteem. But they're the same book.
Same book.
And so all you're reading is the same book, but from different authors. Packaged differently. Trying to motivate you and to get you up. But none of them, all accumulated, like you said, can't equate to one chapter of the Tao Te Ching or one chapter of the Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads. Can't even get close. Never grasp it. Never grasp the depth of that.
Yeah, that's right.
It'll get you motivated to play the game. Eastern spirituality is about the end of the game.
Yeah.
Match point.
Point.
Match point. That's it. Checkmate. It's over.
Yeah.
You either want to continue to engage and be involved in the game and continue to suffer and wonder why you suffer, or you go in the opposite direction.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you won't get involved in the game, but it means that you'll understand the game from a deeper place, from having not played the game. That's what's important.
Yeah. That's why when I sometimes search those books, like self-help type of book, but I guess I find it interesting topic or whatever, and when I get to have a look, table of contents and whatnot, very familiar. It doesn't offer much completely new, and same, different title, different author, but what they are driving to is pretty much same in the end.
Yeah. How to play the game well.
Yeah.
And how to be the winner of the game.
Yeah.
Because the world only accepts winners and won't tolerate losers. That's the mentality.
Yeah.
But if you're watching this podcast, you're listening to this podcast, you're completely fine with being a loser and being ordinary.
Yeah.
And I'm not using loser in a negative tone here. I'm using it in the sense of just being ordinary.
Yeah, but I think ultimately losing is winning, I think. Less is more.
Less is more, yeah.
And that I think that is the truth. Yeah.
But we all work that out. You either work that out when you get older, or you work it out now when you're younger. Most people, they leave it till they're over 70 or 80 to come to those conclusions, like Confucius. But you can either come to the conclusion now and see that all of this game you're playing it's not real. It's not going to give you a greater understanding of life, and not going to give you the tools to alleviate suffering, which is important. And if you're not alleviating suffering, you're not living. You're actually just not living.
Yeah.
You know, you're living in a suboptimal state, in an unnatural state, because society has taught you. Look, don't be content with who you are. Be someone. Be someone else. You know, this is the game of comparison, right? Being someone else is the game of comparison. That's why social media is so toxic. It's contributed to a lot of this mental health problems, because it's constantly telling you to look at other people and projecting your own sense of lack onto them, which then makes you start to behave differently to get to wherever they are.
Yeah.
And that's the depth of a insane psychology. So we should never compare our life to anyone, to other people or anything. This is a cardinal sin that we should never do. And we are in that constant habit of comparing our life. And as I said, when you're comparing your life, you're seeing what you don't have, and that's the depth of a deep psychosis developing within society, actually. So
Yeah, it only leads to more suffering, more pain, right? It only gets you to focus more on what you lack, really, you know. Well, that's just gonna not help anybody, right?
No.
Yeah.
Well, it's like what you said earlier in the podcast. The Eastern spirituality is about focusing on what you have, not what you lack. And I think that that's a takeaway from this podcast for everyone, is that stop comparing and appreciate what you already have, you know, and appreciate the ordinariness and the ordinary person that you are. It's great that you're not special.
Well, that's true. Again, the fame, what the Zhuangzi said once, fame is so unnatural to all of us.
Yes.
And that only gonna leave us more problem. It might just destroy our life, really. And we've witnessed that happen among a lot of celebrities, right? Taking their own lives, and a very sad story. And we need to always remind that to ourselves all the time.
Well, he scoffs at fame.
Well, that's it, isn't
But that's
it?
the Taoist way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, to highlight how ridiculous it is in the end. And not that the famous people are ridiculous, but the whole spectrum of fame itself is such a toxic world,
Yeah.
and produces toxicity within society and within individuals. So it's something that's very unnatural.
The movie was called Fame or something, with Wesley Snipes and Robert De Niro.
Yeah, that's the one,
And
yeah.
Robert De Niro was fan of Wesley.
Yeah, that was it.
Him being a really good baseball player or something. It was pretty interesting perspective to see from Wesley Snipes' character's position,
Yeah,
right?
of course, yeah.
How actually ridiculous fans look like from that place.
From that place,
you know?
yeah.
I was like, oh, that is pretty interesting. Then I felt like how these fans are like, fanatics, you know, somewhat. It's a little bit
Well,
gooey.
fans come from fanatics, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
so
doesn't seem natural.
it's not natural.
Yeah,
We know
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not natural. Actually, the heightened fame that we have these days, well, it has never existed in all of human evolution. It has never existed, right? There has always been, well, maybe like kings and queens and, you know, like tyrants. They were the famous people in the old days. But now, like, we have, you know, everyone's famous. Someone who makes Facebook is famous. Someone who creates this app is famous, a baseballer is famous. You know, it goes on and on, right? But we need to remember that little bit of wisdom, that even as famous as you are, the world doesn't revolve around you, and most people aren't paying attention to you. Doesn't matter, even if you were the most famous person in the world, it's hard for people to focus on you all the time. So don't overestimate yourself.
And another thing, like once I saw Joe Rogan's podcast, I didn't watch the video, but I read just the title of the video, saying some guest that he had said, nowadays of what fame is so important, because basically every second person is on YouTube and whatnot. So that'd be like the other way to look at it. Nowadays, being famous or fame itself, it actually doesn't have much meaning to our lives anymore.
No. Yeah, it's, you know, like if that's, again, like we mentioned earlier in the podcast, if you are focusing your life on being famous, then that's already a psychological problem, you know, because you're assuming that you need to be someone to be validated. Your existence needs to be validated in the eyes of others. And we just have to get out of that mentality. And that's what we've kind of been focusing on in this whole podcast, is trying to get out of that mentality of that you are portrayed as a winner if you achieve a lot of things in life, and that you are someone, as opposed to a loser who's just ordinary. And, you know, they don't need anything in life. They know they're not special, but they're completely content with just living their life.
And they're just fine.
They're fine, yeah. With whatever amount of money they have, with the people they have in their lives, they're completely happy. You and I have seen this all over the world, and what's, you know, ironic is in the third world, a lot of people are happier who have less money and have less possessions. We've seen the rural people in the farms in India and Thailand and Nepal and Myanmar and all of these places, and they're more content than the Wall Street banker.
Yeah.
And so that says a lot about the way we've oriented our society, at the goal orientation of society, and this illusion of the American dream.
Definitely. There's something we all need to look inside ourselves and be very honest
Exactly.
with that. Yeah.
The American dream is literally a dream.
That's right. Just dream stays as dream.
And if you fall for it, it's likely going to be a nightmare.
Right.
Because we got to get out of that mentality, which I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, that everyone can achieve anything. And that's not true. And we have to just be comfortable with that. And that's the Eastern perspective. And that's the actual reality. And so hopefully you all got a lot out of today's podcast. You and I always talk about this subject a lot, because we deal with people who come across our content who actually are grateful, and some people aren't. You know, we've had individuals say before, humility is humiliation, and I don't even know how that works, but anyway, but that again is coming from the winner and loser mindset, you see. Humiliation comes from a winner and loser mindset.
That's right.
Where humility comes from an acceptance of who you truly are and the way the world truly is. So guys, I hope you enjoyed. We enjoy always talking to you guys, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a good week.